It started with a message from the stars. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't an offer of peace. It was an ultimatum. A voice cold and mechanical echoed across every frequency Earth had. Satellites blinked out, power grid surged, and before the panic even reached the streets, the message played. Again, this time clearer, like it wanted to be understood. You have 7 Earth rotations to surrender. Your species has been weighed and found lacking. We are the Council. This galaxy does not belong to you. People laughed at first. Conspiracy theorists buzzed like flies. Governments pointed fingers, assuming it was just another cyber attack. But then the skies changed. Over Tokyo, over New York, over Nairobi, Berlin, Sao Paulo, and dozens of others. Black triangles the size of mountains hung above the clouds, motionless, silent, watching. And then they arrived, humanoid in shape but taller, smoother, with silver skin that shimmered like liquid metal. No facial features, no expressions, just black slits where eyes should be. They didn't speak, they didn't have to. They broadcast their presence like a virus, infecting thought. They called themselves judicators, enforcers of a law humanity never agreed to follow. One message followed them: lay down your weapons, disband your militaries, dissolve your nations. Earth is now under intergalactic protection. Resistance will result in planetary correction. Correction, they said, but what they meant was cleansing. The first shots weren't fired by humans. It was them in the middle of the Sahara, when a group of tribesmen refused to abandon their village. A beam of light turned a 10 mi radius into smooth glass. Just like that, the world cracked. Governments fell to their knees. Presidents and generals signed documents they barely understood. Just to buy time, the news spun the truth into soft lies. Peaceful transition of global power. Cooperation with interstellar governance. But people weren't stupid. They knew what was happening. Earth was being colonized, but deep in the shadows, not everyone bowed. It began with a man named Redden, not a general, not a president, just a former shipyard worker from the North Sea who once helped design cargo vessels. When the first Judicator ship crashed, brought down by a freak magnetic storm, Rain found it before the drones could. What he discovered inside wasn't just alien tech. It was a way in, a weakness. He vanished underground for 6 months. Rumors spread of hidden facilities in Siberia, of mining colonies suddenly gone dark, of freighters heading out to space with stolen parts and no flight plans. And then one day Earth lost a moon, not because it was destroyed, because it was hidden from the dark side of Luna. Massive ship emerged. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't elegant. It was ugly, patched together, armored like a fortress, and bristling with weapons too large to be legal under any planetary code. Engines stolen from mining rigs, weapons from old Cold War silos, plating made of shredded battleships painted on the side in blood-red letters, Black Armada. They said humanity was weak. They thought we'd kneel, but the Black Armada didn't come to negotiate. The first retaliation was over Ganymede, Judicator mothership 5 times the size of Earth's biggest carrier, was blown apart in 19 seconds. No one expected it. No one knew Earth had the tech. Truth is, it didn't. We just made it work. That's the thing about humans. We break things until they work for us. The Council called it terrorism. Earth called it a beginning. When Rain's voice finally echoed across the stars. It wasn't a plea, it was a challenge. This planet is ours. We were born in the dirt and bled in the mud. You want surrender? Then come burn with us. And the galaxy learned something that day. Humans don't lose wars, we turn them into legends. The Black Armada wasn't born in a lab. It wasn't government funded or wrapped in red tape. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. It was built out of desperation, anger, and the raw need to fight back. The man who started it all, Redden, wasn't a hero. People who knew him before all this said he barely spoke unless it was about ships. Some remembered him drunk in broken bars along the coasts, mourning a wife lost to cancer, a job lost to automation, a world that left him behind. But when the adjudicators came, something in him snapped, or maybe woke up. He didn't want power, he wanted revenge. The day after the Ganymede strike, the Council's fury echoed across known space. Their message was short, sharp, and final. Earth has violated galactic law. Class 4 retaliation authorized. Judgment commences in 12 rotations. In human terms, 12 days until extermination. The skies above Earth dimmed, not from clouds but from the Council fleet, arriving in waves, each ship the size of continents, each one capable of vaporizing cities without touching the ground. They didn't cloak themselves. They didn't hide. They wanted Earth to see what was coming. What they didn't see was who was rising underground. While politicians stuttered on podiums and alliances cracked under the pressure, the Black Armada moved like ghosts. Dozens of old war bunkers were reactivated deep under mountains, under the oceans, in the bones of rusted city. The Council had no idea how fast humans could scavenge, repurpose, and weaponize junk. We had no sleek technology, no matter-bending drives. What we had was rage and a million engineers with nothing left to lose. Ships were cobbled together from every era of warfare. Nuclear subs were gutted and reformed into space cruisers. Cargo freighters were converted into orbital drop ships. Fighters were born from jet prototypes that never made it to mass production, fused with salvaged adjudicator parts. And the people, they weren't soldiers, not at first. They were kids who grew up in war zones, hackers who once crashed global economies, X-Miners who could hold a plasma torch steady in Zerog. They were people forgotten by the world before the Council arrived, now given a reason to fight, a reason to matter. There was a woman named Tanya Mural, born in the slums of what used to be Rio. She used to run with smugglers, smuggling organs, weapons, anything that paid. She became the Armada's deadliest pilot, leading the first human kill squad into the stratosphere and slicing adjudicator drones to ribbons in close combat. There was Kurt Landon, a former teacher whose students were vaporized during the Sahara cleansing. He built the navigation systems from scratch by hand, refusing to rely on Council tech. He wanted their ships to feel human, imperfect, messy, but powerful. They called them the Black Wolves, the first squadron to fly out under Redden's command. 10 ships, 1 mission stall the Council long enough to get the fleet ready. The Wolves launched from a refitted lunar base at 0300 hours Earth time. The night before, they didn't get speeches, no goodbyes, just a quiet nod between them as they slipped into their cockpits, knowing they weren't coming back. What followed was a slaughter, but not the way the Council expected. The Wolves didn't fight fair. They didn't follow battle protocol. They dove straight into the hulls of the enemy, crawling along their surfaces like insects, planting homemade imps and fusion bombs right into the creases of their armor. When the first adjudicator carrier exploded above Mars, every sensor in the galaxy lit up. The Council commanders hesitated. Humans weren't supposed to have this kind of capacity. Their species profile said primitive, self-destructive, limited space capability, yet here they were, crippling warships with junkyard bombs and hand-welded torpedoes. Of the 10 wolves, only 3 made it back. Tanya was one of them. Her left eye was gone, her right arm shattered. Her ship barely held together by welded scrap and sheer luck. When she limped back into the hangar, the deck crew just stared. Someone whispered, "We didn't think you'd make it." She spat blood on the floor and growled, "Next time send 20. Word of the wolves spread fast. People who had given up hope started whispering about the Black Armada, the burning moon, the humans who refused to bow. Underground networks activated. Miners on Titan revolted, crashing their rigs into Council fuel lines. A prison colony on Europa turned their slave cuffs into bomb detonators. Refugees in orbit turned cargo stations into battlegrounds. Earth wasn't alone anymore. The Council's control began to splinter. What was once a smooth machine of compliance and order now buckled under the weight of resistance. They didn't understand how quickly humans could unite under pressure, especially when survival was no longer about politics but vengeance. Back on Earth, the main fleet of the Armada was nearly complete. They didn't have names like Invictus or Redemption or Eternal Flame. No, these ships were christened with the rage of the people who built them: the Hollow Sun, the Bone Wakeake, Widow's Edge, Grave Walker, Hell Nest. Each ship was a scar, reminder of what had been lost and a promise of what was coming. In the center of it all, Redden stood before 1,000 pilots, gunners, engineers, and fighters. He didn't wear medals, just a black coat with grease stains and burns along the sleeves. His face was lined with sleepless nights and broken dreams. But when he spoke, silence fell. "We don't fight for peace," he said. "We fight because they made a mistake. They thought humans were ants to crush. They forgot we build weapons from the bones of our dead. They forgot Earth isn't a world, it's a storm, and now the storm is coming." Cheers follow, just the sound of boots moving to stations. People knew what they had to do. Words were fine, but war didn't wait. By the 6th day, the Council fleet surrounded Earth completely. The adjudicator sent another message: "You have failed to comply. Final phase initiated. Witness the correction of your species." And then it started. They called it the first Cinderfall. 10 adjudicator ships opened fire, not on cities but on the ocean. Their beams boiled the Pacific. Tsunamis rose like fists. Storms that reached into space blacked out satellites. Earth screamed. Millions died in the first hour. Not one Council ship was touched until the Black Armada rose. Every port, every secret launch bay, every hidden hangar exploded with fire and metal. Earth's sky turned into a graveyard of steel. The Council had numbers. The Armada had nothing left to lose. The Bone Wakeake, manned by farmers and mechanics, tore through 2 adjudicator drones before melting in orbit. The Widow's Edge used its last breath to ram straight into a dreadnought, cracking it open like a rib cage. Even children, once hidden in bunkers, now ran tech stations, launching missiles older than they were, missiles that still found their mark. For every ship lost 10 more rows, even in death. Humans fought back, escape pods turned kamikaze, crippled ships were used as decoys to bait the council into minefields. Whole squads took their own lives just to overload reactor cores and drag Judicator fleets down with them. No one expected victory, but they weren't fighting for victory, they were fighting to be remembered, to be feared. The council panicked. Their simulations predicted total human extinction in under a day, but the simulations never accounted for what happened when fear turned to fury, when grief became a weapon sharper than any laser. Day 7 came. Earth was in ruins. The sky glowed red from ship fires. Half the Black Armada was gone. But the council had lost something worse: control. Planets they once ruled began questioning their power. Broadcasts from Earth were picked up in alien colonies, videos of humans fighting with nothing but fire in their eyes, screaming defiance through bloodied lips. Messages started pouring in from the moons of Real. We are with you, Earth. From the ocean world of Xanther, burn the council, we will help. From forgotten slave worlds, mining colonies, rebel clusters, a chorus of resistance rose from the ashes of Earth. It wasn't just a human war anymore. It was a galactic rebellion, and it started with Earth. The Black Armada, crippled and bloodied, stood in the heart of it. A symbol, a warning, a prophecy. They wanted surrender. What they got was a revolution painted in flame, and the galaxy was just beginning to burn. The galaxy was bigger than anyone on Earth had imagined. When the council came, they made humanity feel small, insignificant, primitive. But now that illusion was shattering across the stars. Whispers turned to signals, signals turned to fleets, and fleets turned to flames. It started on the world of Tharsium, an icy mining colony orbiting a dead sun. The council had worked its people like machines, generations born into slavery, digging for helium-9 to power Judicator ships. For centuries no one fought back. The Tharsi had no weapons, no voice, and no hope until Earth's message reached them, a single grainy transmission bootlegged from a stolen council channel, showing Redden standing before the Widow's Edge, covered in soot and blood, shouting, "You are not alone. If you've got breath in your lungs and fire in your gut, pick up anything sharp and aim it at the ones who chained you." The Tharsi didn't have guns, but they had drills, saws, thermal cannons. The council's local station commander laughed when the uprising began. She wasn't laughing when the workers poured molten fuel into the life support vents. Over 2,000 council enforcers died. In a single day, Tharsium was free, and it wasn't the only one. In the dust plains, Oftra, an amphibious species known as the Vun, broke their council loyalty pacts and declared allegiance to the Black Armada. They'd fought in council wars for centuries, forced by treaty, used as disposable ground troops. Their elders remembered rebellion. All they needed was a spark. Earth had lit the match. The Black Armada, though bruised and bleeding, became the beacon. Every shattered planet that rose in rebellion started painting their ships black, not out of loyalty but out of symbolism. Black meant defiance. Black meant vengeance. Black meant Earth had survived. By the time day 12 hit, the day the council promised Earth's Extermination they didn't send exterminators, they sent negotiators. A ship known as the Oriv, all gold plating and delicate design, descended into Earth's upper orbit, its crew 6 serpent-like diplomats known as Vash Terran came under full diplomatic protocol. They asked not for surrender but for discussion. That alone shook the galaxy. The Council had never negotiated. Their word was law. They didn't treat with subspecies. But the war had changed the rules. The Black Armada had rewritten the script, with wreckage, corpses, and burning carriers, so now they wanted to talk. Redden didn't greet them with a handshake. He met them inside the gravier with the air thick with fuel and the hum of weapons primed in the walls. Tanya stood behind him, bandaged and scarred, flanked by 3 ex-prisoner turned security officers. The lead Vash Terran bowed its head. We come in the name of stability. Redden didn't blink. You mean control? We seek a ceasefire. Mutual benefit, resources, territory sharing. There is no need for further violence. Redden's voice was cold. You glassed half the Pacific. A strategic misunderstanding. We buried 7 million people in salt and steam. There was silence. Then he leaned in. You want peace now because your fleets are burning. You want order now that you've seen what happens when humans stop surviving and start fighting. But there's no peace left to offer. You made sure of that. The Vash Terran looked nervous. The Council hadn't prepared them for this. Not for a man who didn't want power or alliance, just revenge. You misunderstand our offer. No, Redden said. I reject it. He let them leave alive but made sure their ship was tagged 3 hours later as it rejoined the Council formation near Jupiter. A signal activated from inside its hull. Parasite drone, silent, deadly, broadcasting every movement, every conversation, every piece of encrypted communication. The Black Armada didn't need peace. They needed targets. Across the galaxy, rebellions began organizing, not just sporadic attacks anymore, but coordinated strikes. Network emerged, not centralized, not structured, but unified by fury. They called it the burn chain. At its center, Earth; at its heart, the Armada. Every transmission came through what was once an old Earth radio tower buried Alaska, now upgraded with alien tech and encrypted protocols. From there, Tanya ran most of the coordination. She barely slept, eyes bloodshot, fingers tapping over rusted keys. Veltra wants to hit a logistics center near Dross Prime. She barked over comms. Tell him to wait. We're softening the shields first with Hell Nest's fusion cannon. Tharsium reports they've captured 3 Council scientists. Tell them extract tech, then make a public example of them. No mercy. Repeat, no mercy. She looked up. You heard me. This wasn't a clean war. This was old school, dirty rebellion. Meanwhile, the Council scrambled. Their fleets were overstretched. Their allies were defecting. Their vassal worlds, once compliant, now rioted in the streets. What once was an empire of perfection now crumbled under its own arrogance. Worse still, fear spread through their elite ranks, not fear of Earth but fear of what Earth had taught the galaxy. That no species had to kneel. That fear could be turned into firepower. That one planet of savages could rip apart a civilization that had ruled for 10,000 years. The Council tried propaganda. They broadcast lies. Earth's rebellion is fueled by dark science. The Armada infects minds with hate. Peace is the only future. But the problem was too many people had seen the truth in real time, in real blood. Footage of Widow's Edge flying into a dreadnought at point blank, recordings of miners on Tharsium cheering as their chains melted, images of young pilots painting their faces black before battle. Truth wasn't a weapon, it was a virus. And it was spreading fast. On the 13th day, something changed from the far edge of the galaxy, beyond any known system. A signal arrived, cracked, distorted, almost missed by everyone. But the Armada's deep signal team caught it, filtered it, cleaned it up. It was a warning. A small, terrified voice in broken galactic code. We were the first. We fought them 10,000 cycles ago. They did to us what they tried to do to Earth. We lost. We thought hope was dead, but now we are coming. Tell Redden we remember. We are still here. The signal was traced to a dead system, blacklisted in every council archive. A world called Eluan wiped from maps, and yet life remained. Tanya read the report and slammed her fist into the console. Redden needs to see this. He was already standing behind her. You think it's real? She asked. Redden's eyes narrowed. It's not about what I think. It's about what we do next. Within days, 3 Armada vessels departed Earth space, heading into unknown coordinates, not to fight, not yet, to reconnect with the forgotten enemies of the Council. If alone still lived, if even one other ancient species had survived, then Earth wasn't just leading a rebellion, it was leading a resurrection. Back home, the war didn't pause. The Council made one last push, deploying a new weapon, the silencers. They were Judicator variants, made of black alloy and filled with neural disruptors designed not to kill, but to erase whole cities on Mars. Colonies were wiped clean, not destroyed, just emptied. No bodies, no blood, just silence. That's when Redin stopped taking prisoners. He issued a command across the burn chain. No more rules, no more restraint. For every silencer they send, we send back 10,000 dB of fury. Burn their fuel lines and NBSP, their comms. Smash their sanctuaries, make the galaxy scream again. And it did. Veltra launched a bioplasma virus into a Council breeding facility. Tharsium sabotaged a Council Parliament ship, causing it to crash into its own moon. Earth's own fleet tore down a Council citadel orbiting Saturn, its pieces burning like falling stars. The galaxy didn't just burn, it screamed with justice. 1 month after Earth's refusal to surrender, a new map was drawn, not by politicians or empires, but by ashes. Worlds once marked red by the Council were now painted black, and in the center of it all, a ragtag fleet of exile, prisoners, dreamers, and ghosts, flying in patchwork ships guided by anger and driven by a single truth. Humanity will never kneel again, not to kings, not to gods, and not to any Council who dares demand surrender. The journey to Eluan wasn't fast. The coordinates came buried in ancient code. Fractured and incomplete, the system didn't show up on any standard Council map. It was erased, not just hidden, but deliberately wiped from memory. What little they found pointed to a dark part of history, one even the most rebellious aliens whispered about with fear. The Council didn't forget Eluan, they buried it, and that made it worth finding. 3 ships made the journey, the Hollow Sun, Hell Nest, and Witchwake. None were in perfect shape. They'd been through battle after battle, their crews were patched up with grit and stubbornness, barely holding together, with duct tape engineering and scavenged reactor cores, but they had one advantage: they knew how to survive. Where others didn't, Tanya commanded the Hollow Sun herself. She insisted on it. Said she wasn't about to sit behind a desk while someone else walked into ancient darkness. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, and her scars still hadn't healed. But it didn't matter. She needed answers. They all did. Because this wasn't just about winning a war anymore. It was about understanding the enemy, and to understand them, they had to meet the ones who'd faced them first and lost. The trip took 17 standard days through Council blacklisted space, and every jump threatened to tear the ships apart. Cosmic storms, gravity shears, black holes that hadn't been mapped in any modern stellar log. This region of the galaxy was a graveyard. Burnt-out stars floated like skeletal remains. Frozen planets drifted through vacuum silence, their surfaces still etched with blast marks from wars no one remembered. The closer they got to Alan, the darker space became. Tanya stood in the bridge of the hollow sun, staring out the viewing panel. It was quiet. Too quiet. Anything? She asked. Her second in command, a sharpied woman named Villain, replied, no transmissions, no energy signatures, no life signs. Tanya frowned. They sent a signal. They're alive, or they were. When they finally broke through the cloud of magnetic static surrounding Alolan, everyone on board went silent. The planet looked wrong. It didn't rotate. It hung in space like a dead eye, gray, cold, surrounded by shattered moons and burning asteroid fields. Its surface was scarred, cracked, bleeding. Rivers of black liquid that shimmered unnaturally in the light of its dying star, but there were structures, towers, bridges, cities built into the bones of mountains, all broken and leaning like they'd been frozen mid-collapse. No movement, no lights, no life. Are we too late? Someone whispered. Tanya said nothing. She stared at the largest structure, a spike of metal rising from the center of a crater bigger than any building on Earth and still glowing faintly. She leaned forward. Prep, the drop teams were going down. Surface of Alan felt heavy, not just physically, though gravity was off by a few percent, but emotionally. Like the planet remembered pain and wanted to share it. The air was breathable but tasted metallic like rust and ash. Black sand shifted under their boots as the crews moved out, weapons drawn. Split up, Tanya ordered, groups of 5. Keep visuals up, don't trust anything. The teams fanned out across the ruins, scanning for any trace of life. It didn't take long before they found it. One of the Hell Nest recon groups stumbled into a chamber beneath the spike tower, half flooded with dark water. Symbols lined the walls, pulsating dimly in rhythm with a pulse that seemed to beat from under the ground. Not technology, not biology. Something in between. And then the water moved, not from disturbance, but like it was being pushed aside. From the depths, a figure rose, tall, slender, its body covered in gray, laced armor that looked grown, not forged. Eyes that weren't eyes, just orbs of light in deep sockets. Its voice echoed without sound, broadcasting directly into their minds. You are late. The team froze. No one raised a weapon. Tanya arrived moments later, breath catching in her throat. When she saw it, not fear, just awe. You're Alonian. The being nodded slowly. We were Ellen before the council made us ghosts. Its name was Oryx. it wasn't alone. Beneath the surface of the dead world, deep in cryochambers and lightless vaults, hundreds of Elune survivors remained in stasis. Oryx was there. Sentinel, the last one awake, tasked with waiting for the signal that had now come from Earth. We fought the Council before your son was born, Oryx said. We built weapons they had never seen. We killed their gods, we broke their treaties, and they erased us. Tanya leaned against the cold metal wall. How'd you survive? Not by winning, Oryx said, by hiding. He showed them. Projectors lit up the walls with memories, battles fought in burning nebulae, armadas that made the Black Armada look like rafts, and Alan fought hard, harder than anyone had. They created the first anti-council coalition, a united force of 7 systems sworn to never bow. They lasted 6 years, and then the council brought out something darker. Silencers, Tanya asked. Oryx shook his head. Worse, he showed them a weapon that fed on rebellion, not a bomb, not a virus, something living, a construct that absorbed identity, history, language, culture, and left nothing behind but silence and submission. We called it the bleeding memory, Oryx said. It was how they erased us. Tanya's fists clenched. Why call to us now? Oryx looked at her, light glowing softly from within his armor. Because you did what we couldn't. You made them bleed. It took days to convince Oryx to awaken. The others, he was afraid. Afraid that if they rose too fast, the council would detect them and come to finish the job. But Tanya wasn't leaving Elune without allies. We didn't come this far to find ghosts. She told him, we came to build an empire, and we need yours. Oryx stared at her for a long time, then finally said, then let us wake the dead. One by one the Elune survivors emerged, weak at first, disoriented, but still filled with the fire they once carried. Scientists, soldiers, philosophers, builders. Their technology hadn't aged like Earth's, even after thousands of years in stasis. Their weapons could still melt a moon. They pledged allegiance not to Earth but to the fire Earth had started. And when Tanya sent the signal back through the burn chain has risen, the galaxy shook. The council intercepted it. They panicked because the last time Alan stood, it took 7 systems to bring them down. And now they stood with Earth. By the time the hollow sun, Hell Nest, and Witchwake returned to Earth, the sky was no longer just filled with human ships. Armadas from Veltra, Tharsium, and dozens of rebel cells had gathered in orbit, waiting, preparing, building. And now Alan's black and silver vessels joined them, sleek, predatory, humming with ancient energy. Redden stood in the command bay of the Grave Walker, watching it unfold. For the first time in months, he smiled. We're not fighting a war anymore, he said. We're building a new galaxy. The day the first Black Armada fleet crossed into council space was marked in blood and silence. No cheers, no ceremonies, just cold steel, steady breathing, and weapons humming with barely restrained fury. Earth's skies, once dark with enemy ships, now shimmered with black painted fleets from 100 rebel worlds. Above the ashes of ruined cities and boiling oceans, they had built something terrifying, a coalition without politics, forged only by pain. The alien had delivered more than ships. They brought history, secrets the council thought dead, coordinates to fuel depots, weaknesses in Judicator armor, flaws in council strategy that had once taken centuries to discover, all now in The hands of rebels. The moment had come. Phase 1 break. The spine, the target was Rixid 4, a supply nexus for the entire Eastern Council Quadrant, the beating heart of their logistics network. From that single system, resources flowed to over 300 fleets, thousands of planets, and countless installations. It was fortified like a vault. Nothing had ever gotten close. It was defended by Council Prime Guard, elite Warburn, bred in artificial stars and raised on obedience. But they'd never faced the Armada. Redden himself commanded the assault. From the Grave Walker, positioned at the center of the spear, he wore no armor, just a reinforced vest and a long black coat, the same one he'd worn back when he scavenged wrecks off the North Sea coast. He refused medals, refused rank. But when he spoke, every ship listened. All of us were broken once, he said, his voice calm over the comms. By them. They took our families, our homes, our language, our futures. This isn't about survival anymore. This is about reclaiming what they tried to erase. Today we don't just fight for Earth, we fight for every world that forgot how to scream. There was no dramatic launch, no music, no final countdown, just a quiet order. Burn everything that feeds them, and the fleet moved. Rixid 4 was a jewel, its orbit filled with shimmering stations, and orbital cranes the size of small cities. Trade routes spiraled out from it like veins. Automated haulers patrol. Drones and energy conduits ran across its skies in perfect order. For centuries it had been untouched, a symbol of Council supremacy, a monument to invincibility. The Armada tore through it in 11 minutes. It wasn't just brute force, it was strategy, human. Veltron. Alun minds had merged into something the Council couldn't predict. They fought dirty, they jammed nav signal, turned Council AI against its own, flooded systems with viral sub routines that made defense grids fry. Their own targeting systems. Witchwick led the first charge, diving headlong into the lower orbit defenses, while spewing out stealth pods full of saboteurs. The Hollow Sun, repaired and reborn, hovered in low orbit, launching barrage after barrage of kinetic slugs wrapped in plasma. And the Hell Nest, oh Hell Nest, used its rebuilt spine cannon to puncture the primary orbital command ring in a single gut-churning blast. 1 second it was there, the next, a slow explosion blossomed across the sky, like a red sun dying. When Tanya Morell's squadron breached the main control tower, she found nothing but chaos. Council officers screaming in languages once considered superior, guards turning their weapons on themselves as override codes collapsed their programming. She walked through the carnage like a ghost and tagged the central core. Rixid 4 is ours, she said over comms. Get the bombs ready, Rain's voice replied. We're not holding it, no, she said, we're sending a message. The bombs were not nuclear, they were memory bombs, Yuntech, ancient and forbidden. When detonated they released a short-range quantum disruption that shattered memory banks, historical records, archives, even organic storage. By the time the fleet left Rixid 4, it no longer existed in any meaningful way. Its data was erased, its purpose devoured. Even the Council wouldn't know how to rebuild it. History itself was being turned into a weapon. Phase 2, bleed the Empire. Now the Armada moved faster than the Council could react, while Council High Command scrambled to regroup. Fleets of Rebel ships tore through infrastructure. With surgical cruelty, fuel depots were sabotaged, satellite clusters collapsed. In chained explosions, entire worlds, ones that had grown fat off council, trade suddenly found themselves cut off, their populations turning on the very empire that once fed them, on the frozen moon of Jakar. A council genetics lab was raided. Inside, rebel forces found children bred for obedience, injected with compliance enzymes, raised in void cells with only holograms of the council crest for comfort. Tanya personally blew the place to dust. These kids don't need liberation, she told her squad. They need to forget where they came from. The Black Armada didn't take prisoners unless they were useful. They didn't believe in rehabilitation. They believed in ending the cycle. One by one, council outposts fell, and each time they did, they were either obliterated or rewritten. That was something new, not just destruction but replacement. The Armada began leaving behind black flags, orbital beacons, pulsing with coded messages that said, "This world is free, this world is ours, this world remembers." A new symbol emerged across the galaxy, a tattered banner with a red flame in its center, wrapped in coils of barbed wire. It came to be known as the Burned Banner. Redden never declared himself emperor, but something had shifted. Where once he gave orders as a rebel, now others waited for his word like law. Even the On listened when he spoke. Even hardened war archives lowered their eyes in his presence, not out of fear, but because they sensed it too. This wasn't a resistance anymore. This was the beginning of a new empire, born in ash and fury. They started calling it the Empire of the Burned Banner. Not officially, not on charts, but in whispers and graffiti, in broadcasts, echoing from newly freed systems. It spread faster than council propaganda ever did. The council struck back, of course. They launched retaliation waves, deployed the Second Judicator Corps, elite fleets enhanced with new anti-rebellion protocols. They tried to reestablish control over the trade routes, rebuild the comm relays, retake systems they'd lost, but it was too late. Their own soldiers began defecting. Council AI began malfunctioning. The burn chain had embedded code worms into every communication protocol. Even internal transmissions were no longer safe. And then came the worst blow. Redden turned their own allies against them on a heavily industrialized planet known for its council loyalty. Rain sent no fleet, just a message: you were always tools to them, now be tools for yourselves. He promised freedom, trade, autonomy. Elior's ruling clans hesitated for 6 minutes, then they killed their own governor and raised the Burned Banner in the skies above their capital. That was the end of council unity. From there, the empire crumbled, but Rain wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want to defeat the council, he wanted to replace them. "We can't let the galaxy go back to what it was," he told Tanya one night aboard the Gravewalker after yet another council station fell, because if we do, it'll happen again. Someone else will rise, someone worse. We're not fighting for peace, Tanya, we're fighting for control. She stared at him. "That's dangerous talk." "I know," he said. He didn't blink. "But I'd rather build a brutal order that remembers pain than let this galaxy forget what fire tastes like." She didn't argue, because deep down she agreed. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were the new architects of power. By the time the council realized what was happening, their own territories had fractured into chaos. Regional governors declared themselves kings, supply lines vanished, their war machines stopped working, not from sabotage but because they no longer believed in the war. The Black Armada began the final phase. Phase 3, collapse. But it wasn't about destruction anymore. It was about assimilation. Instead of burning cities, they offered loyalty. Pacts, worlds could join the empire of the burned banner, keep their traditions, their culture, their identity, as long as they remembered who saved them. It was psychological warfare on a galactic scale, and it worked. Even species who once feared humans now looked to them as the only ones who had stood and survived. Even enemies began to kneel in a forgotten part of the council's capital. An old senator looked out across a burning skyline and whispered, "We taught them how to fear, they taught us how to burn." They used to say, rebellion ends in one of two ways, with freedom or with a new throne. And the Black Armada, once a scattered group of survivors and firebrands, now ruled more than any Earth nation ever had. Over 400 systems flew the burned banner. Council space was fractured, crawling with deserters and ex-generals, hiding in asteroid fields, praying not to be found. Entire worlds once considered elite were reduced to backwater shadows, forgotten by trade routes they used to command. But at the center of it all sat a man who never wanted a crown and was now worshipped like a god. Rain robes he didn't sit on, thrones carved of alien stone or hold meetings in glass palaces. His throne was still the battered command chair of the grave walker, surrounded by old cables and dented control panels. He still wore his black coat and patched boots, but his word now moved galaxies. One signal from Redden's console could send fleets to raise a planet or raise one from ruin. Billions of beings who had never heard of Earth now whispered his name like a curse or a prayer. He never asked for that power, but power, when gathered, demands use, and slowly use turned into habit. In the third cycle of the new calendar, year 1 of the Empire, things began to shift. Not violently, not suddenly, but like a hairline fracture running under a wall, unseen until the foundation starts to crumble. The first sign came on Thorny's, a newly liberated moon, rich in mineral salts used for fusion fuel. Its people had fought alongside the Armada, helping destroy Council shipping lanes. But when a human-led construction fleet arrived to stabilize operations, they found resistance. Thorny leaders wanted independence, trade, a say in how their resources were handled. They didn't want occupation. The Armada didn't call it that. Of course, they said it was strategic integration. But when the Thorny shut down the spaceport in protest, a cruiser named Crimson Mercy was sent to orbit and fire a warning shot into the nearby canyon. 3 hours later, the Thorny government collapsed. When news of it reached the Armada broadcast channels, the response was muted. Some cheered, others looked away. A few silently began asking questions. Tanya Merle was one of them. She stood in the Gravier's briefing chamber, arms folded, staring at a holographic map showing the newest integrated systems. Redden entered quietly behind her. "You're doing it," she said. "Doing what?" "Turning this into exactly what we fought against." Redden didn't flinch. "We gave Thornies every chance. They wanted to cut us out, start hoarding resources while our fleets are still at war on the rim. I made a call. You bombed civilians. I sent a warning. You blew open a canyon. That flooded a city. Rain walked past her and tapped a button, zooming out the holograph. This is the galaxy now. It doesn't run on hope, it runs on order. The council burned because they forgot that. I'm not going to. Tanya narrowed her eyes, and when we forget it, he turned to her. I haven't forgotten anything. I remember every name on the wall in Sector 9. Every kid we lost in the second Judicator strike. Every planet that begged for help and was told, submit or starve. So now we're the ones deciding who eats. We're the ones keeping them from killing each other while we rebuild. She shook her head. You sound like them. Silence stretched between them. I sound like someone who survived, he said softer now, and I don't want to do this forever. I want to finish the war. Then I'll step down, but until then we hold the line. Tanya didn't answer. She didn't salute either. She just walked away. Elsewhere in the Empire, others started to notice the shift. In Veltra once Earth's fiercest ally, protests broke out after human trade officials forced out local leaders under suspicion of disloyal behavior. The Veltron general, Sarek of the Ember Pools, sent a transmission to the Armada High Council. We joined the Black Armada to be free from the yoke, not to exchange one collar for another. He was ignored. A week later, Sarek's capital experienced a communications blackout, during which human forces resecured the administration. The burned banner still flew in the sky above the city, but now it felt heavier. Redden, for his part, didn't celebrate the victories anymore. He worked in long stretches of silence, reviewing threat reports, territory assessments, recruitment requests. He slept only when his body demanded it. He didn't smile, he didn't laugh, he carried the whole damn thing on his back, and some days it felt like he could hear it cracking. The war wasn't over. Council remnants had pulled back into the null zone, forbidden cluster of systems beyond the galactic rift. There they regrouped under a new banner, one of restoration. Their broadcasts were quieter now, more humble. They called themselves the Order of Origin. They claimed they didn't want the old council back, they just wanted balance. But Rain didn't believe them. The second we stop watching them, he told his inner circle, they'll start breeding another fleet, another army, another silencer strain. So he kept pushing, kept ordering strikes, kept absorbing systems, kept pulling more and more worlds into a galaxy held together by fire and fear. And somewhere along the way, even those closest to him stopped calling him Redden. They started calling him Commander of Flame. He didn't correct them, but inside the cracks something else stirred, a movement. Not loyal to the council, not loyal to Earth, something in between. They called themselves the Ashper. They were rebels to both sides. They believed the council had been tyranny and the Armada had become empire. They wore no insignia. They didn't broadcast. They attacked quietly in the dark, striking Armada outposts, assassinating supply officers, freeing indentured worlds on both sides. And they started gaining followers. Tanya heard about them first from a former smuggler on Kranthus 7 who slipped her a data spike in a burnt-out bar full of silence and shadows. It's not over, he whispered. They think it is, but the fire ain't clean. It leaves embers, and sometimes embers grow The spike contained coordinates, a remote moon in the Varick Belt. Tanya didn't tell Redden. She went. Alone, when she arrived, she found something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, real hope. The Ashbourne weren't organized. They weren't armed to the teeth. They didn't have super weapons or warships, but they had something stronger. Conviction. Their leader was a woman named Cassa Vin, part human, part Aluan, born in the ruins of a slave colony bombed in the first wave of the war. She had never known a world without fire, and now she wanted to build one. We don't want revenge, Cassa told Tanya. We don't want crowns. We want to stop the cycle. The one where pain makes rulers out of survivors, where we forget what we fought for because power feels so damn good in our hands. Tanya sat with her. For hours she didn't speak much. She just listened. When she returned to the grave walker, she didn't mention it too. Rain, not yet, but her silence said, "Enough. You found them, didn't you?" he asked. She looked at him. Yeah. His jaw tightened. Are they council? No. She said, they're us, or what we were. He sat back, and for the first time in a long time he looked tired. They're going to come for me, aren't they? I don't know, she said. They should. By the start of the second year of the Empire, the galaxy had changed again. The Council was in ruins. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a symbol of rebellion, then a symbol of dominion. And now something uncertain. Under the burned banner, peace came at a price. And in the cracks, embers stirred. The kind of embers that don't stay quiet for long. The problem with building an empire from fire is that eventually the fire turns on you. It didn't happen overnight. There were no marching armies or dramatic coups, no bombs planted in high towers, no dramatic assassinations. No, it started with silence. The kind of silence that grows in conversations that stop mid-sentence, in meetings where generals exchange glances but say nothing, in whispers, traded in back rooms, between old rebels who had once fought for something purer. And it started with Tanya Myrle. She hadn't reported back in 3 weeks, not officially. Her ship still transmitted its registry. Her name still appeared on the command net, but she was gone. Off-grid, somewhere in the belt. Somewhere with the Ashbourne. Redden didn't send a team after her. He didn't demand answers, but he stopped sleeping. He spent his nights staring at an old photo, not of Earth, not of his wife, not of the grave walker. It was a grainy snapshot of his crew on day 1 before the first strike on Ganymede. 10 people, greasy uniforms, welding goggles around their necks, exhausted, hopeful, human. Only 2 of them were still alive, and one had gone quiet. Elsewhere in the Empire system stopped replying. Not big ones, not command centers. The fringe worlds, the places far from Earth, barely touched by Council presence before the war, places that joined the Armada out of hope and were now wondering if they'd traded one cage for another. At first, the disappearances were blamed on rogue Council holdouts, then on pirate resurgence, then on Ashbourne interference. But the truth was simpler, colder. People had started to opt out. They weren't revolting, they weren't resisting. They were just leaving, turning off their beacons, shutting down their ports, refusing to send resources, declaring local sovereignty, and hoping the Empire was too stretched to bother. And for a while they were right. The Armada couldn't keep up. Too many systems, not enough loyalty, not enough fighters who still believed in the Mission belief was fading, and when belief dies, empires die with it. The tipping point came on the world of Orin. 5, a water-rich gas giant moon that had served as a black Armada fuel depot. Since the first orbital victories, its people were quiet, efficient, loyal. They never complained until they did. It started with a labor strike, the first. In Armada territory, they wanted autonomy, local elections, a say in fuel distribution. The Armada Council, a body that had become more ceremonial than functional, tried to delay the issue. Redden sent a compromise offer, minor trade privileges, in exchange for full compliance, or in 5 rejected it. So Redden made a decision he hadn't. Since the early days of the war, he sent a dreadnought, the Witchwake, once a symbol of rebellion, now a tool of compliance, entered orbit and began disabling communications, ports, and civilian access towers. Not bombing, not yet, but making it clear you don't disobey Earth. That's when it happened. Someone fired back, a ground-based cannon, ancient tech, held together by rust and desperation, tore through the Witchwake's outer hull and sent it limping out of orbit. It was symbolic, more than strategic, but it was enough. Enough to prove that Earth wasn't untouchable anymore, enough to remind the galaxy that fear doesn't last forever, and most of all enough to show the Ashborn that the time had come. First public Ashborn broadcast went out 12 hours later, a cracked low bandwidth transmission echoing across neutral frequencies, bouncing off abandoned Council satellites amplified by rogue Veltrin towers. Kessin stood in frame, dressed not in armor but in plain clothes, patched, lived. In real, she didn't shout. She didn't threaten, she simply spoke. The fire saved us once, but now it consumes. We honored Earth's pain. We fought for their survival, but this is not survival, this is conquest, and we will not kneel again, not for crowns, not for flags, not for ghosts wrapped in flames. It was less than a minute long, and it shattered 4 sectors overnight. Because Kessa didn't just speak to rebels, she spoke to the ones inside the Empire, the ones who still remembered what it meant to fight for something instead of under something, and her words hit like an orbital strike. Tanya returned 3 days later. She didn't sneak back, she didn't hide, she docked at Earth's high orbital ring, still scorched from the early battles, now functioning as the Armada's central hub, and requested an audience. They gave her one. The command chamber was emptier than usual. Redden stood alone at the table. Tanya entered, helmet under her arm, eyes heavy. Been a while, he said. Not long enough, she replied. Silence, then he nodded. You're with them. I am. You're not here to explain that, are you? No, he stared at her for a long moment. I'm not going to arrest you. I know. I'm not going to stop you. You will. She stepped closer. You always do. That's the problem. He swallowed hard for the first time. His voice cracked. I built this so we wouldn't have to kneel again, so Earth wouldn't be a punchline in some aliens data archive. I didn't ask for this crown, no, she said, but you've worn it for too long. I didn't mean to become them, but you did. She placed a data spike on the table. Full coordinates of the Ashborn fleet. Our leadership, our outposts, our encryption, everything. His eyes flicked to it. You're turning yourself in. I'm giving you a choice. What choice? She met his eyes. Let us go. Silence. If you chase us, she said, this ends in blood, and we both know how much blood Earth has left. That night Redden didn't sleep. He Didn't speak, he just sat alone in the Grave Walker's command bay, staring out at the stars, wondering when exactly the rebellion had stopped being about freedom and started being about control. He could press a button and wipe out the Ashbourne's leadership. He could trigger a hunt across the stars. He could silence Tanya, silence Kessa, silence the whispers, but something deep inside him, something tired, something old, whispered, and then what? The next morning the spike was gone, not destroyed, not used, just gone. No order was sent, no strike launched, no speech given. Tanya disappeared again, and with her the Ashbourne grew bolder. The empire of the burned banner didn't fall, but it shifted. The name started appearing less on broadcasts, less in comms. The Black Armada still flew, but it flew quieter. Rain stopped giving speeches. He stopped calling it an empire. He started sending relief ships to worlds that hadn't asked. He started refusing expansion requests from generals, was hungry for power. He started letting go, not all of it, not fast, not completely, but enough. And in the quiet that followed, something else began to grow, not rebellion, not rule, but maybe balance. History would never agree on what Redden was. Some said tyrant, some said liberator, some said weapon, some said savior. But all of them said one thing the same. He burned the stars, and when the ashes settled, he let the galaxy breathe again. The stars were quieter now, after decades of screams, broadcasts, orbital firestorms, and ships carved open vacuum. The galaxy had entered a strain. Silence, not peace, not yet, but something close enough to be confusing. The Black Armada still existed. Its ships still patrolled the borderlands. Its old banners still fluttered above station hubs and city towers across half the known systems, but it wasn't an empire anymore. Not in the way it had been, because Redden had stopped pushing. He never announced it, never held a press conference or issued a declaration. One day the Armada's fleet simply stopped advancing. Fuel drops stopped. New colonies were left to govern themselves. Trade contracts weren't renewed. The giant machine of the burned banner began winding down, not collapsing, not breaking, but letting go. It confused people, made others nervous. Some generals were furious. A few even tried to stage coups, quiet ones testing the waters. They didn't last long, not because Rien stopped them, but because no one followed. There was no appetite for conquest anymore, because the war had cost too damn much, too many dead, too many children born in starships who'd never seen soil, only steel, too many cities built from wreckage and memory, not joy, too many ghosts. Rain had gone to Earth alone. He didn't tell his command staff, didn't bring guards. He arrived in a civilian shuttle, no markings, no escort, and touched down in the ruins of what had once been a port city in the old north. It wasn't even rubble anymore. Nature had returned. Vines over metal, grass pushing through concrete, trees growing in the shells of old tanks and orbital cannons. He walked alone, didn't speak, didn't need to. He found the old shipyard where he used to work before the judicators came, before war, before fire, before the first shot fired over Ganymede. The yard was gone, just rusted beams and a cracked support crane still holding on to nothing, but beneath it, buried dirt and time, was the stone wall where someone had carved names of the first Armada fighters, the wolves, the scavengers, the children turned soldiers. His name was on it too. He stared at it for a long time, then, using a shard of metal, he scratched one more name beneath his own. He didn't say who it was for. Meanwhile, the Ashborn moved in the shadows, not to destroy but to plant. To grow, their cells expanded. They weren't secret anymore, but they weren't centralized. They helped planets organize their own defense militias, helped write new constitutions, helped rebuild old cities without Armada oversight. They didn't carry weapons. Most days, they carried tools, and their emblem, a flame burned into ash, surrounded by a ring of stars, began appearing on schools, hospitals, community wells. Tanya was never seen publicly again, but her name was whispered on worlds where children needed protection from rising warlords or where food was shipped without expectation of tribute. Kessa and Tanya sent it. They'd say, no confirmation, just hope. It was enough. The last great fire came not from humans, but from the council remnants, calling themselves the Order of Origin. They launched one final campaign from the Null Zone using sleeper tech and stolen Aluan data. They targeted a system called Nia, recently freed from Black Armada authority and now governed independently by its people. They expected confusion, disorganization, a power vacuum. What they found instead was resistance, not from Earth, not from war fleets, from the people, Veltron, fighters, alien sentinels, freeborn, ex-slaves, Ashbermetics. The system fought together, not as an empire, not as rebels, but as survivors who'd finally had enough of kings in any color. The Order of Origin was crushed. Not erased, just rejected. No one wanted their galaxy anymore. The world had changed, and the fire didn't answer to crowns. Now back on Earth, something strange started happening. People came home, not in waves, not as a caravan, but one by one, system by system. Old Earthborns began drifting back to the ruined cities, the thawed forests, the crumbling towers. Engineers, soldiers, teachers, poets, broken, tired souls who just wanted to see where they'd started. And they began to rebuild. No orders, no master plan, just hands in the dirt. Bricks laid without instruction, power lines strung from old towers by kids with spark-stained gloves. A city was born. No one named it at first. It didn't need one, but soon the transmissions began. Outpost Hope, that's what they called it. A little arrogant, a little naive, but it stuck, and others followed. Outpost, Second Light, Settlement, Emberfall, Haven, Ashroot, and then finally New Earthrise. Redden never returned to power. He remained on Earth, quietly living in the shadow of the reborn city. People found him now and then, usually kids who had grown up hearing stories. They expected a giant, a warlord, a god. They found an old man in a coat sweeping ash from stone steps, eyes tired but not cruel. Some asked for wisdom. He gave them silence. Others asked if he regretted it. He gave them a quiet nod. One girl asked, "Did we win?" He thought about it, then said, "We stopped losing." In orbit above the reborn world, a monument was built, not a statue, a ship, the Grave Walker, decommissioned. Defanged, hung silently in space. No weapons, no engines, just one transmission on an endless loop. We are not the fire, we are the memory of it. Burn wisely, and beneath it in a glass dome were the names, thousands of them, etched into the walls: Black Armada, Ashborn, Veltran rebels, Tharsium, miners, Ellen architects, even former council defectors who helped save lives in the final years. No ranks, No flags, just names and silence. The galaxy didn't end in conquest. It didn't end in annihilation. It didn't end in peace either. It just continued. But now the stars held choice. Some systems chose isolation. Some chose trade. Some chose to join new alliances. Fragile and uncertain, but there's Earth became less of a capital and more of a story, a myth whispered across colonies and transport bays. There was a time they demanded Earth's surrender, and Earth said no, and then everything burned. And somehow we're still here. In the final years of his life, Redden was asked to speak at a memorial. He declined, but he wrote a message. It was short, just 6 words, carved into the floor of the old council chamber in New Earth. Rise. We stood. We burned.